Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Welcome to today's presentation on how applying lean construction can improve project outcomes. We're joined today by Tony Woodford, our Customer Success Manager, and myself, David Simpson, Global Product Manager. Today, in terms of the agenda, we've got a lot of things to get through, but to kick off with, we'll be looking at the lean construction kind of movement in terms of principles. We'll then have a look and a closer look at the last planner system and an overview and benefits section of the presentation. And then finally, we'll look into how Elecosoft can help support you adopt lean construction principles. And then we'll pause at the very end for any questions. So if you do have any questions, there is a control within the GoToWebinar feature that allows you to add questions. Tony will be kind of leading on that at the end of the session. So do make sure you drop your questions in throughout. Okay, without further ado, let me jump into the first part of today's webinar, really, which is around the principles of lean construction. And I think in terms of just setting the scene, always useful, right, in terms of addressing and looking at the shape of the industry and the macro challenges facing it. We know navigating the building life cycle is complex, challenging, and unpredictable. But traditionally planning happens up front, and execution often obeys, rigid, linear, prescribed formulas from the outset. And this can make it very difficult to react to challenges that inevitably crop up over the lifetime of a project. What is more, the industry is heavily influenced by informal conversations and commitments captured manually, which can ultimately make it difficult to track accountability, creating tensions and so on that can erode product predictability and profitability. And what's more, any knowledge that is gained can remain siloed, right? And as a consequence of that, the kind of two kind of data points on screen there are real challenges, right, that face the industry. 70% of projects are over budget and delivered late. And if you dive into that expenditure, a significant amount of that is with waste, right? And what I mean by waste is anything that doesn't add material value to the outcome of a project. And an obvious example of that would be rework, for instance. So how does the industry overcome some of these challenges? Well, if we look at the next kind of series of slides, really there's a real growing movement around lean construction, right? Particularly over the last 30 years. And ultimately, what is lean construction? Well, lean construction is a philosophy, right? It's a philosophy around adopting practices and technologies that help reduce costs, material, time, and effort on a specific project in hand across and potentially across an entire portfolio project, right? And each improvement and benefit that you gain obviously rolls up overall across your portfolio. Now, in terms of its principles, right? They evolved, as I mentioned earlier, 30 years ago from lean production, right? Which I guess is, in many senses is synonymous with car manufacturing. Toyota is probably, the most famous kind of application of lean production. But it's been adapted, right, to lean, to the construction industry. And in terms of thinking lean with regards to construction, there really are 5 kind of common elements that really drive thinking lean. And those typically are, how do we shorten construction time? How do we reduce costs? How might we accelerate, the activities, the jobs to be done that we need to get done? How do we overall improve our planning process and the control that we put around our planning? So that really kind of frames what lean construction is. It's in many senses a philosophy and a series of methods, right, to effectively remove waste. Now, in terms of some examples of lean in construction, again, there's a handful, right? I'll just showcase a couple on screen here, but modular and prefab is probably a clear kind of parallel between the construction industry and the manufacturing industry, right? How do we introduce off-site manufacturing techniques into what it is that we do in terms of delivering projects? and again is probably one of the biggest kind of growing macro trends right in the construction industry. And if you look at one of our recent case studies with Wilmot Dixon, for instance, their use of Power Project helped them prove that by prefabbing 50% of their building off-site, it would halve the number of deliveries that they get on site, and indeed also halve the number of workers on site. So again, real cost opportunity for you to look at with regards to your use of Power Project and modular and prefab techniques. Another example might be the use of robotics, autonomous rovers, drones, right? Bricklaying robots, again, are getting better in terms of their accuracy. Think 3D printing, right? And the use there in terms of printing and indeed prefabrication, right? And then the use of autonomous rovers and drones to help facilitate structural inspections, take photographs of progress, particularly in hard to reach places, again, improves things like work safety and also your efficiency to validate what jobs have been done. And then the final one is around adopting lean construction kind of planning techniques and methodologies to help help understand and underpin the jobs that need to be done on site. And in regards to lean construction, there's a real need, because there's a real need to kind of plan beyond just your tasks as a contractor, right? How do you onboard the other stakeholders within the project into the overall process and upstream some of that engagement that typically happens too late, so that you can improve the flow of trade and jobs through a site? And that's really where Last Planner as a methodology is starting to help lead and facilitate a real movement within the way jobs are planned and executed. So if we now kind of flip roles and kind of focus in on what the Last Planner is as a system in terms of overview and benefit, really to kick off with, it all really sort of stems from kind of a 2007 industry study where the Department of Construction Science at Clemson University effectively showcased that the operating efficiency of construction workers was about 40%, right? So in terms of productivity gap, there's a huge productivity gap within the workforce, and that becomes even more challenging when you throw in labor shortages, material procurement and so on being challenging ever so more these days. And that loss of productivity is largely attributed to poor construction team coordination. Now, the Last Planner system methodology is all about creating transparency. How do we upstream stakeholder engagement in the planning and execution phase? How do we bring the right knowledge, the right expertise, and coordinate the jobs to be done, and build and remove waste at the same time? And where traditional planning methodologies would typically create a push mechanism in terms of these are all the jobs and you need to do it then, actually thinking about flipping the planning process, starting from the right and then working from right to left, and really bringing in a pull mechanism. And ultimately, in creating and connecting teams, you can drive productivity and execution. Now, in terms of the solution space today, again, what's pretty typical, right, in down on site is the physical board, right? Today, down on a site cabin, no doubt 9 times out of 10 for those attending today, this is a common experience, right? You'll have tradespeople working around a board trying to coordinate jobs to be done by pushing post-it notes and sticky notes around a physical board. The other way you might be solving those problems today as well would also be via Excel, or potentially you're utilizing a third-party application, and more on that later in terms of the problems in using those solutions. But if we think about implementing the Last Planner system, again, as I've already articulated, the construction industry suffers from a lack of collaboration, largely due in part to project teams struggling to communicate effectively, right? And the Last Planner system is all about overcoming that through 6 connected conversations. Now, these connected conversations, in essence, create an integrated control system that drives collaboration, facilitates and engages your trade partner as partners, and ultimately drives productivity. Now, the methods of the Last Planner system in terms of creating those 6 connected conversations are summarized by the kind of infographic that's on screen. But if we kind of break that down into their core components, ultimately you start with a kind of 30,000 feet view of the world, right? You are, you're starting at your milestones. You're looking at key deadlines that you need to hit. What are our main objectives? What are our main goals of a project? And then, how do we then break those down, segment the project up into kind of more detail, right, over time, to a point where, we're looking at timeframes typically, in terms of a 6-week look ahead. Often the terminology is used there in terms of 6-week look ahead. How do we, then create and deliver on the reliable promises that we are looking to make as tradespeople, and then get all of that learning back into the overall schedule. Now, the upshot of all of these touch points in terms of conversations is that each one of these is an opportunity to learn and feed back into the overall project. And it's this learning that in essence strengthens the system, right? It means that, through each one of these kind of stages, particularly when we come down to, weekly work planning and daily coordination, we have the opportunity to learn and strengthen the system, right? Double down on the positive outcomes, right, that have been successful in delivering a section of the project, and then also, conversely, weeding out the poor decisions along the way as well. And by creating, this system, again, this infographic, that we've got on screen, really becomes a bit of a flywheel in terms of benefits, right? As we learn and we improve, so does our system, so does our planning and execution, so does our delivery outcomes in terms of the next project. Okay, and you might be thinking, well, so what, right? What's the so what? Well, by adopting these practices, again, by empowering trades through, a much more decentralized decision-making process, by driving information transparency, globally across the world, the outcomes include as follows, right? Through early stakeholder involvement, there's a 51% reduction in clash and eventual rework. And if we dive into kind of key components of the Last Planner system, which I showcased earlier, we look at the pool planning world, by using pool planning as a methodology in terms of breaking down your overall project, it helps reduce conflicts by 45%. And the upshot of that, in terms of breaking that down into weekly work planning and daily coordination, means that as a project team, as a construction team, you are reducing the amount of work that you need to do, because you're removing things like rework. You're removing those waste and those pinch points within the project lifecycle. And the upshot of that, right, is you've got more opportunities to bid for more work, to tender for more work, to execute on more work. And that means, improved bottom line, and potentially repeat business, right? Now, if I flip back to, as I mentioned earlier, right, there's some solutions out there today already that perhaps you're all using, in your day-to-day, right? The physical whiteboard, the Excel spreadsheet, potentially another third-party application. Well, really the problem with these solutions is that they only serve really to hide or redirect the fundamental problem, right? The solutions reinforce suboptimal plan performance, as because ultimately all of this information remains siloed, right? You're doing great stuff here in terms of coordinating jobs to be done, in terms of making sure that the project is delivering as planned and executing on time. But the lion's share of the information and the knowledge that you're gaining throughout this project is lost at the end of the schedule, at the end of the process, I should say, because rarely does this information that happens on screen get back into back into the overall schedule for you to learn in the future. And daft things like the post-it note falls off the wall, right? Again, data remains siloed, knowledge is lost, and so there's nothing that we can learn from. And at the end of the day, what this boils down to is no one in the office actually really knows what's happening. What is reality? How do we translate and align both the plan with what's happening down on the ground? So these solutions, whilst our solutions aren't actually solving problems. So teams are busy, but not necessarily working smart. So what are we doing about it as a business? Well, here at Elecosoft, again, in terms of helping you adopt lean construction, whilst the remainder of this webinar will focus in on our latest innovation, Connect, there are some other areas of our portfolio that can help you adopt lean construction. Firstly, Power Project, again, in its the client form is packed full of features and benefits that can help support you adopt our lean construction. As I outlined earlier in the presentation, Wilmot Dixon reaped the benefits of using Power Project to showcase the use of modular with what-if scenarios. And we've got a whole host of training consultancy that you can look at if needs be. If we look at our wider portfolio, our 4D capability delivers an integrated 4D end-to-end solution. This allows you as planners and schedulers, designers, engineers, and construction leads to work in collaboration in harmony with one another in real time, right? Rather than in a siloed state where might be typical in other settings. We also have our vision product, and if we think back to kind of the lean kind of mindset, how can we create cost opportunities within the business? Again, vision is there to drive significant cost opportunities to planners and construction leads by integrating workflows, use of cloud storage and data to drive business intelligent dashboarding. And then finally, our Connect product, again, which I'm going to go into more detail in a moment. Again, this is our latest innovation in the planning space, and it's a collaborative task management tool that is there to simplify projects by connecting the right people at the right time. And there's a host of other services as well that we have as well within our portfolio, and I recommend certainly looking at our wider webinar series as well. Ben Taunton has just recently finished one on our 4D offering as well, so definitely go and check that one out. And so what I want to kind of articulate here, right, is there are a number of ways in which Elecosoft, particularly in the context of Power Project, can help you adopt lean construction practices and techniques. So let's take a bit more of an in-depth look at Connect. So Connect is our brand new offering. It's recently just been launched at the beginning of January this year. It's a brand new web application designed to build teams with reality. And what we mean by that is ultimately through a series of 3 core principles, right? How do we connect the teams with the right information? That's about how do we seamlessly integrate the Power Project schedule or other master scheduling systems into the day-to-day, so that there is a dynamic connection between the office and the site. How do we create the collaborative planning board experience that is as tangible as the post-it notes on the wall, so that we can streamline user adoption and ensure that each trade can get in there and manage their own tasks and activities. And then finally, how do we deliver the data insights, right? How do we empower decision making? Again, as I mentioned before, there with the other solutions that you may be using today, right? Rarely does that information typically get back into the overall system. Well, by digitalizing this overall process, by getting the data back into the overall system, you then have the data to push into future projects and therefore drive and strengthen how you do things in the future. But let's just take a quick look at the product. Again, I'm just going to give you a flavor of what's in the product. Tony is here after the webinar as well, if you want to take a more in-depth look at the product. Okay, so without further ado, let me load up the product. Again, as I said, as I mentioned before, the product is a web application. This makes it potentially device agnostic for you to consider as well as a solution. It's a solution that can stand up on its own or directly with a Power Project license. And in terms of getting started, again, if I just showcase, I'm not going to show you all of the product, but if I give you a view of the kind of collaborative space, right? Really, it all hangs around our whiteboarding capability, which really has been designed to be tangible, right? To mimic the behavior that you have down on site with your sticky notes and physical whiteboards. In terms of getting started, I'll just show you what's going on here. So we can have a direct link back to the overall schedule. So we can see what it is that we're up to, and we can build out our teams, right? Our project teams, our trades that we might want on site. And I'm just going to quickly get going by building out a series of sticky notes. And again, in terms of moving things around, again, very quick, very tangible to show where the handoffs and trade-offs are between given trades. Again, if I wanted to go in and edit that capability, I can, so I could give it a better name, a better title. I could perhaps move the responsibilities. I could define my crew size in here. Really what I'm trying to showcase here is that we have we're capturing all of the relevant information that you might need as an organization to ensure that you've got the right flow of people going through your site and delivering on promises. Now, the great thing about this solution as well is that it will tie directly back to the overall schedule. So if I just quickly showcase this, as time goes on and as we progress our weekly work plan through our daily huddles and so on, if I now flick back to the master plan, you'll see, if I just close that up, that we've started bringing through our percentage complete. Now that can then be pushed back into Power Project today, and therefore you get that complete 360 feedback going on. Again, as I mentioned before, Tony, get in touch. We'll leave our contact information at the end of this session. Do get in touch with Tony, who's more than happy to take you through a more in-depth session. And with that, we can now lead into questions and feedback.
Good afternoon. Yes, thank you for that, David. It was very interesting. I've had a hand up from David Clark, actually. So what I'll do is I'll give him access to speak to us and see if he's got a question you wanted to post.
Sure.
If he's still here. No, no problem.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there we go.
Can, yes. Hi there.
Hi, David.
It's going to be very unexciting. No, I accidentally pressed that, that so apologies. But it was an interesting report, so thank you very much.
That's okay. I do have a couple of questions actually that come through whilst she's going through this. So possibly one for you, David, to start off with is, in our own opinion, whose responsibility do you think it is to actually create and manage a last plan or an overall plan? Is it the original planner, or is it the site manager? What do you envisage?
Yeah, great question. So for me, this is about, connecting people, right? The planner starts with the overall high level view of the world, right? Are effectively ultimately accountable for the end-to-end delivery of that. But this is about connecting the right people. So getting on board and collaborating with, the tradespeople, the people at the end, right? At the end of all of this that are physically doing the jobs. It's about how do we onboard them and connect them to the overall plan. At the moment, and through the conversations that we had, which led us to design the solution that I've just quickly showcased there, is how do we make that easy? How do we get that feedback back in? Because at the moment it rarely happens in an end-to-end fashion every time, and I believe because of that there's an awful lot of lost opportunity. There's an awful lot of missing data insights which the construction industry can learn from, right? Which we can then circle in and learn from in the future. In short, everyone, right? Everyone. The more people you can onboard, the more people you can get into a collaborative platform like this, the better the outcomes are going to be.
Yeah, that probably leads on to the next question I've got here about, do you actually need a Power Project license to use the software? And from previous conversations with other people I've demoed it to already, as David alluded to, the platform itself is standalone. So no, you don't need a Power Project license. You log into it through a website, and it's actually possible to create a plan and a whiteboard without even having a master plan from Power Projects in the first place. But obviously having that master plan through a program from Power Project means you can then feed back anything that's been progressed straight back into the master plan. So no, yes and no. You don't need a license, but a license does help if you're wanting to progress. And then off the back of that one, I've also got a question about setting up and actually using the product. So that probably goes back to you, David, in terms of actually creating accounts and how easy is it to get people on board?
Yeah, great question. So again, we've got a very simple onboarding kind of training overview. It's less than an hour to get going. Within that hour, as a person, that is, you are good to go. We have a series of how-tos as well, but also in terms of designing the system, as I mentioned before, it's been designed with the mantra, it's got to be as tangible as sticking, post-it notes on the wall, and hopefully that was, evident in just the very small slice of product demo that I showcased. Yeah, it's simple to get going. It's simple to onboard other users, as you'd expect. You've got all of those controls in a software as a service deliverable. You can, invite whoever you need into the product. You can put the level of permissions that you want to give them access to, be that read only for some of it, for all of it, or edit, for all of it or some of it as well. That's all physically possible within the product as well.
Yeah, and that partly covers the question I've got here about, does Aster actually connect back to your main projects file with them?
It does, absolutely, yeah. So we have a file sync between the products that will allow you to not only push your project to Aster Connect, but then pull that information back in as well. So you can get that progress information directly back into the overall plan.
Excellent. And if there's any other questions, can't see anything. Or just one other thing, do you think it would replace other products in the future, like Site Progress, or is it side-by-side product? Yeah,
for me, I'd see them as tackling slightly different use cases, right? Site Progress Mobile is a great product for its use case in terms of specific parts of the project I need an update when I'm walking around the site on. And then, Aster Connect, that more kind of holistic overview capability, that more collaborative environment where you are bringing and onboarding trades into the overall planning process. So they're tackling different use cases. Over time, through feedback, I'm sure, things may change. But yeah, that's where I'm interested in getting feedback right from all of you on these webinars, and through further conversations beyond that.
Yeah, and we're getting more and more questions actually. So will it connect through Vision and in turn through to some sort of reporting like a BI or reporting template?
Yeah, we're working on some dashboarding capability in the product at the moment, which will give you those high level kind of, plan percentage complete stats. That information, I am looking at how we can get that through the Vision platform. Again, there's a real nice sequence of events between all those products in terms of how we build that round trip. We don't have that yet, but that is certainly our vision and our plan.
Yep, and then one last question I've got here is with reference to probably down to actually what's happening in the future. So there's a question about, if you add extra details to the plan, will they get fed back into the original Power Project?
Yeah, great question. So at the moment, no, and that's intentionally by design based on the feedback we had designing the product, right? In terms of the feedback we had, who we were dealing with around the scheduling side of things were the last thing we want is bloating out the schedule with loads more detail, right? I imagine over time we might want to expand our current capability to allow that to be a self-serve, do you or do you not? But at the moment it doesn't. All it does is it rolls up the percentage complete.
Brilliant. I think we've pretty much hit our half an hour that we was aiming for in this session. If you want a demonstration or if you want any more questions answered, you know where I am. And I'll just let David wrap up for you.
Excellent. Appreciate that, Tony. Yeah, to echo Tony, some great questions coming in there. Do keep them coming. Please do use the info@elecosoft.com or do feel free to call us as well and put yourself through to Tony, who'll be more than happy to take you through a more in-depth demo of our latest innovation in the lean construction space. Thanks all for attending and look forward to speaking to you soon. Take care.